tell you all the story of how the uses of silk were first discovered. Thousands of years ago, and thousands of miles away, across the vast continent of Asia, in the land that we now know as China, there lived a princess. Princess Li Zhu. Now, she wasn't your average kind of princess. She liked to go out of the palace grounds and play with all the dirty, stinky street children and throw mud balls at innocent passers-by. But more than anything else, she loved to go climbing trees. Now, I hope all of you here have recently climbed a tree.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. And if you haven't, shame on you. Well, Li Zhu, one day, she climbed to the top of one particularly tall tree, and when she got to the top, she broke the #1 rule that you must never break when you are climbing trees. She stood on a dead branch. Snap! She fell, ow, 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 all the way to the bottom of the tree. Now, miraculously, she was unharmed, and she only had a few scrapes and bruises, but when she got back to the palace that evening, her father, the emperor, saw the state she was in, and he was very angry. "You're never again going playing outside of the palace grounds, and I forbid you from ever climbing trees." Well, as you can imagine, this made Li Zhu very upset. "It's not fair! I hate you!" And she stormed out of the palace, into the gardens, and sat underneath a mulberry tree with a cup of tea to make her feel better. And she looked into her cup of tea, and the cocoon from a mulberry moth had fallen from the tree and landed right into her hot beverage. And as she pulled out the cocoon, strands of silk started to unwind. Now, Li Zhu was a very clever princess, and she knew immediately what to do with these strands of silk. And so she started to weave the strands together with some of the magic that all princesses are blessed with, as I'm sure you all know. And before long, she made herself a beautiful scarf. And because this scarf was made out of magic, when she wore it, it made her completely invisible. Now, straight away, Li Zhu knew what to do with her scarf, and that evening she snuck into the emperor's chamber where he was having a meeting with his most trusted advisors who were telling him the terrible news of a dragon in the west of the country that was going through the whole area, pillaging and burning and killing as he went. Now, Li Zhu, with her scarf, she thought this was just the kind of adventure that was right for her. So, she immediately went down to the kitchens and gathered some food, went to the sword and stole a sword from the armoury, and then she went to the stables, grabbed her horse, and she rode out of the city and across China to the Himalayas, where the dragon was rumoured to live. And she slowly went up into the foothills, through some cold, bone-chilling fog. And then she saw the opening of Li Zhu's cave, Qilong's cave, the dragon that she had come to fight. Now, Qilong was a great dragon, and as she entered the cave, she saw the skeletal remains of fallen warriors before her. And then, the half-eaten body of a yeti. And then, stepping over the charred remains of a baby panda bear. She entered the main cabin itself, and there was Qilong the dragon, lying on top of an enormous pile of gold and bones, apparently fast asleep. And Li Zhu, she looked down at her puny little sword, and she realised maybe this wasn't such a good idea. And when she looked up back to the dragon, Qilong opened his yellow eyes, stood up on his feet, and spoke. "Well, I can smell you. I can taste your fear. And I can hear your heart beating. Come now, don't be shy. Tell me where you are and speak to me." And Lizu, she bravely spoke back to the dragon. I only came to see whether the tales were true, whether you were as big as people say you really are. And the dragon spoke back. Well, am I? Truly, the stories fall utterly short of your enormity, O Qilong the Magnificent. I'm sure they do. My teeth are like swords, my claws spears, my tail is a thunderbolt, and my breath is death. And with that, he let out a great gust of air from his mouth, and it was so strong that it whipped the scarf right off Lizu, and she was stood there in full sight of the dragon. And before she could run out of the cave, Qilong rushed over to her and pinned her to the floor with one of his sharp claws, leered over her and ordered her to make him his own magic scarf. That was big enough to wrap around his own mighty neck. And so Lizu scurried out of the cave, accidentally kicking the baby panda as she went. And she went down to where her horse was tethered, sat on a rock, and realised she'd messed up big time. What have I done? Oh. And then she had a brilliant idea. Like I said before, Lizu was a very clever princess. And so she went around all the mulberry trees she could find and gathered as many cocoons as she could. And she built herself the first ever silk kite. And as soon as she finished it, she went back up to Qilong's cave. Qilong, I've made your scarf, but I'm afraid there's an even bigger dragon up here who wants to fight you for it. Qilong had never heard anything as preposterous in his whole entire life, and he charged out his cave, looked up into the sky, and there, sure enough, was the silhouette of a dragon against the sun. And he started to beat his wings, and he took off to fight his foe. Now, of course, I'm sure you've all guessed already, this wasn't a real dragon. Lizu had built her kite in the shape of a dragon to trick Qilong, and it worked perfectly. And as Qilong went higher and higher up into the sky, Lizu, with the lines of silk that she was holding, let the kite go higher as well until she ran out of silk, and she too was lifted up into the sky, and up and up and up they went, thousands of feet below them, until they got to the height of Mount Everest, 8,848 metres. And at that height, the altitude is such that there just isn't enough oxygen in the air to stay conscious. Now, like I said, Lizu was a very clever princess, and she knew about this problem, and she held her breath the whole time with her little princess magic. But Qilong, huffing and puffing, started to feel faint, and he blacked out and fell down, spiralling round and round, down to the bottom of a deep Himalayan ravine with sharp rocks at the bottom, and splat! Dragon spleen there, dragon guts over there, and even dragon lungs over there. And then Lizu slowly drifted to the floor safely with her kite. And that was the first time silk was used for a parachute. And when she got back to her horse, she rode back through China, a news spread of her great deeds. And when she got back to the capital city of China, she was greeted as a hero. And her father, the emperor, from that day onwards, allowed her to climb as many trees as she wanted. And also, for all of you here today, next time you put on a bit of silk clothing, whether it be a scarf, a shirt, maybe your favourite seductive silky socks. Remember Lizu, and thank her in your mind for how she discovered silk. Thank you.